Hi students, this is your video lecture that you should be listening to at about week 2. Don't forget to fill out the guided notes that correspond to this video lecture as you listen to it. If we left off during our last lecture discussing how atoms, because of their valence electrons and wanting to satisfy that 8 electrons in the outer shell, form molecules. They bond together, they form covalent bonds. We also discussed the different types of elements that are found in living things. I gave you that little acronym, CHNOPS: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. Today, we're going to talk about how the atoms of those particular elements combine to make what we refer to as the biomolecules, the molecules that make up living things. So a little terminology. When we in biology or chemistry talk about organic molecules, having the term organic in front of molecule designates those molecules as being derived from a living organism, produced by a living organism. The organism doesn't necessarily have to be alive, right? When an organism dies, it still matter. But organic molecules are molecules that were made by a living organism, and they contain the elements carbon and hydrogen. All right, carbon and hydrogen. They can also contain other elements, but they need to contain carbon and hydrogen. So for example, carbon dioxide is CO2. That contains carbon, but not hydrogen. So it wouldn't be referred to as an organic molecule, right? It's not part of a living thing. It's not part of its structure. There are 4 types of biomolecules that we're going to talk about in this module. We're going to talk about carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. So again, having bio in front of molecule just designates it that it's from a living organism. All right. Even though all of these are biomolecules, the functions in living things are very diverse. So carbon is really the basis of all of these molecules. If you recall, carbon, you probably don't remember this, it's okay. Carbon has an atomic number of 6, which means it has 6 protons. Because a carbon atom is neutral, it also has 6 electrons. So if it has 6, how many would go in the first 2? And in the second, we would have 4. How many would make the atom stable? 8. So what it does is that it forms covalent bonds in order to really obtain 4 more electrons to stabilize that outer shell. And it can form these covalent bonds with other carbon atoms, with nitrogen atoms, with hydrogen atoms, with oxygen atoms, phosphorus, and sulfur. Okay, so generally we say that carbon is like the skeleton, the framework of all of these biomolecules, and then those other elements, atoms of those other elements combine to really make all of these diverse biomolecules. A little more terminology before we actually start talking about the different biomolecules. All of these groups, except lipids are a little different, like carbohydrates, proteins, nucleic acids. We're going to learn about those biomolecules, and we're going to learn about them in this way where we're going to learn about their building block. So think about their building block as the little molecule, and then that little molecule can join multiple times to make the larger biomolecule. And in biology, we have terminology for this. The little molecule, that's the building block, right? Like a wall, the building block is the single brick. So the building block of these biomolecules is referred to as a monomer. Mono means 1, so monomer, 1 unit. And those monomers will join, okay, in reactions in our body covalently together to make a larger biomolecule, the polymer. Poly means many. So the polymer consists of many of these monomers all covalently bonded together. So whether we're talking about carbohydrates or proteins or nucleic acids, they all follow this similar thing. What's going to vary is the structure of the monomer and the polymer. They're each going to have different monomers. So they're not all going to be brick walls. Some are like beaded necklace and the monomer is a bead. Okay, I'm giving analogies. Don't take me literally. Okay, so this table I'll be bringing back every time we go through one of the biomolecules. So biomolecules, molecules of bio, life that make up thing. So these are the categories. Carbohydrates, okay? Carbohydrates is the category of the biomolecule. Carbohydrates, just like others of them, have the building block, the monomer, sometimes referred to as a subunit. For carbohydrates, the monomer is referred to as a mono-1 saccharide. Saccharide means sugar. So carbohydrates, the small single sugars, are referred to as monosaccharides, and then those will join together to make the larger carbohydrates, the polysaccharides. So what is the building block of a carbohydrate? A monosaccharide. It can join to make larger carbohydrates, polysaccharides, and we're going to learn examples and what their function is. So we're starting with carbohydrates. So carbohydrate is the category of the biomolecule. You probably have heard the term carbohydrates before. You've probably heard it in regards to food, because a lot of the food that we eat, right, was derived from a living thing, a plant, an animal. So if you think about pasta, right, pasta has a lot of carbohydrates. Why? Because pasta is made from wheat from a plant, okay? So carbohydrates, one of their function in both the organisms that produce the carbohydrate, right? So plants produce a certain type of carbohydrates, animals produce different ones, is an energy source, right? A source of energy. We eat pasta for energy. Sugar is also a carbohydrate. We eat it for energy, and we're gonna give you specific examples. Carbohydrates also have a different function. Plants make carbohydrates not only for energy, but also for their body structure, right? Plants don't have bones that are what we have that hold us up, right? Plants have what are referred to as cell wall and other components that help them grow upright. And those components are carbohydrates. So we're going to learn about two different carbohydrates that plants make that each have a different function. One is energy, one is structural. There are many different types of carbohydrates. There's the monosaccharide, that building block, the little sugar, and that can join to make di. Di means two sugars combined, a disaccharide, like table sugar is a disaccharide. And then many of those monosaccharides can join to make polysaccharides. So here's just a picture of the structural, sorry, that's my dog, the structural components. This is just a picture of different structural components that carbohydrates have, like they're showing you a cactus. The cactus is able to grow upright because of carbohydrates. This is ectoskeleton, right? The shell, which contains a different carbohydrate of this crab, chitin, that is able to give it structure and support. And this is a bacterial cell wall that contains carbohydrates and gives the bacteria its structure. All right, so now I'm gonna go over a few different examples of carbohydrates, specific examples, because until now we've been talking general. What are carbohydrates used for in living things? We've talked about their categories, monosaccharides, disaccharides, polysaccharides. Now I'm going to give you specific examples. Some of these you've probably heard about. All right, so first, monosaccharide. So to keep us organized, monosaccharides is the simplest carbohydrate. It's the monomer, the building block, right? So monomer is a very general term for any building block. Monosaccharide is the specific monomer of carbohydrates. All right, you're going to probably need a little going over this. So a monosaccharide is, we often refer to it as a single sugar molecule. It can also be called a simple sugar. Actually, mono and disaccharides both are called sugars. Those are the smaller ones, and we commonly refer to them as sugars. So this is an example of one monosaccharide I'd like you to know. It's the most common one you hear about, and this is a picture of it. Remember, this is a molecule, and molecules are composed of atoms covalently bonded together. So in this picture, what this tells us is that this molecule has these carbons. Remember, carbon I said was like the skeleton of most of these. Each of these here, starting with carbon, they're numbered here. Carbon number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then here's the 6th carbon. Give it that skeleton. And then this is the formula. So there's C6 because there's 6 carbons. There's 12 hydrogens, and you can count them here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're missing 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There we go. 12 hydrogens and 6 oxygens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the formula for this is glucose is C6H12O6. So glucose is one that I would like you to know. Glucose, okay? Glucose is actually what travels in our blood and gives our cells energy. So sometimes if you go to the doctor, they'll measure your blood glucose levels. And people that are diabetic, their blood glucose levels generally elevated. Glucose is the one I want you to know. There are other ones that for this class are not so important. These are other ways you may see glucose represented in textbooks for abbreviation, so they don't have to draw out all the atoms. So you may see it like this B, which eliminates those carbons that make up this ring structure, or even like D, where they don't put any of the atoms, but we just kind of know that that's glucose. So glucose has this hexagon shape, which is characteristic of monosaccharides. All right, so which monosaccharide is important to know? Glucose. Glucose is how our cells obtain energy. Now, disaccharides, what does di mean? Di means 2. I don't want you to know any examples of these for like the unit test, but just to know that di means 2, so those are 2 monosaccharides joined together. Examples of disaccharides are milk sugar, right? When you drink milk, it tastes sweet. That's a disaccharide called lactose. Sucrose is like the sugar that you put in your coffee, the table sugar. That's a disaccharide. We often don't eat monosaccharides independently, right? Like you don't buy glucose at the grocery store and consume it. Generally, the glucose is produced in our body after we consume a disaccharide. Our body splits the di into one and releases the glucose. All right, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but our bodies can make disaccharides too, right? Or other living things. They join 2 monosaccharides together. Here's a monosaccharide, here's a monosaccharide, glucose, glucose. They join them in a reaction that involves enzymes. These atoms here that are highlighted in blue are removed, and then the 2 single monosaccharides you can see here now are connected into a disaccharide. So that's synthesis production in the same regard. So mono produces a di. There we go. Our bodies can break down when we consume a disaccharide. Like if we consume table sugar very quickly in our digestive system, we'll break the bond that holds it together and will produce 2 monosaccharides. Okay, now polysaccharides. Poly means many. So these are many monosaccharides joined together, more than just 2. All right, so examples of polysaccharides that are important to know are starch. You've heard of starch before. So starch is produced by a plant, and it's that what the plant uses for energy. So in potatoes, there's a lot of starch. Plants produce potatoes, and all that starch in the potato, then the plant sucks out when it needs. We humans can also eat starch for energy. Glycogen is how we store energy. So if we have excess glucose, single monosaccharides in our blood, we will join them to make glycogen, a polysaccharide. And finally, cellulose is the last type of polysaccharide that I want you to know. Cellulose is the structural polysaccharide that plants produce in their cell walls. Animals, we can eat cellulose. We call it fiber. We can't digest it. That's going to come up now. All right, so here's starch. Don't worry about all the zigzags. I'm trying to show you that it's a poly, many of these single monosaccharides joined together. It's produced by plants. That's how they store their energy. Humans eat it for energy. So all the foods we eat, potatoes, flour, rice, those are all derived from plants. That's starch that the plant produced, and we consume for energy. Cellulose, right, is another polysaccharide that plants produce. They don't produce this for energy, they produce this for structure, right? This is how a plant can grow upright. It doesn't have a skeleton, but it can make cellulose. We refer to cellulose as fiber, right? We eat fiber. We can't digest it. We can't break these bonds and make sugars out of them and use them for energy. But these fiber molecules will stay through our digestive system and kind of clean out our gut. And that's what keeps us regular, keeps us going to the bathroom regularly. It also, I'm saying here all the benefits to fiber. It helps us stay regular. It also feeds, actually, we have bacteria in our digestive system that give us vitamins, help our immune system, and the fiber feeds those good, healthy bacteria. Fiber also slows down how quickly we absorb sugar, right? So if you eat an apple versus apple juice, the apple has also the fiber that was produced by the plants. The juice just has the sugars. If you eat the apple, those sugars are absorbed less quickly into our blood, and it's much healthier than we just have the apple juice, because this helps prevent things like diabetes. Okay, this was kind of long for today. I hope you were able to follow everything. Take care.